I need you to listen to me carefully, because what I'm about to tell you destroyed 3 families, exposed a 30-year lie, and revealed that the man I married was never who he claimed to be. I slept with my husband's father to break him the way he broke me. But 8 weeks later, I was staring at 2 positive pregnancy tests, and the impossible truth that surfaced would change everything I thought I knew about my own life. By the end of this story, you'll understand why revenge is a fire that burns the hand that lights it. But sometimes that fire is the only thing that can burn away the lies we've been living in. Before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment right now telling me where in the world you're watching from. Whether you're in Lagos or London, Toronto or Tokyo, I want to know. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because this story takes turns you won't see coming, and you're going to want to be here for every single one of them. Now let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Seraphina Cole, and 3 years ago, I thought I had everything. I was 27 years old, working as a junior architect at one of the most prestigious firms in Atlanta, and I was married to the most charming man I'd ever met. His name was Dorian Ashford, and from the moment I saw him at a gallery opening downtown, I knew my life was about to change. I just didn't know it would change in the way nightmares are made of. Dorian was the kind of handsome that made you nervous. Dark hair that curled slightly at the temples, eyes the color of aged whiskey, and a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in any room. He came from money, old money, the kind of wealth that doesn't need to announce itself because everyone already knows. His family owned Ashford Holdings, a real estate empire that had been building Atlanta's skyline for 3 generations. When he pursued me, I felt like Cinderella being noticed by the prince. I was a girl from Savannah, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a hospital to keep food on our table. I had clawed my way through college on scholarships and sheer determination. And suddenly, this golden man with his golden life wanted me. We dated for 18 months before he proposed. The wedding was featured in Atlanta magazine, 300 guests, a reception at the Ashford family estate, a dress that cost more than my mother made in a year. I remember standing at that altar, looking into Dorian's eyes, thinking that I had finally escaped the struggle, that I had finally made it. I was such a fool. The first year of marriage was a dream. Dorian was attentive, romantic, generous. He bought me a car. He surprised me with trips to Paris and the Maldives. He made love to me like I was precious, like I was sacred. He made me feel like I had won the lottery of life. But dreams don't last. They never do. The cracks started small. A late night at the office that turned into a pattern. A distance in his eyes when I spoke about my day. The way he started checking his phone constantly, always tilting the screen away from me. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that successful men were busy men. I told myself that love meant trust. Then came the night that shattered everything. It was our 2nd wedding anniversary. I had planned a surprise dinner at home, cooking his favorite meal, wearing the dress he loved most, the red one that made him look at me like I was fire and he wanted to burn. But Dorian texted at 7 saying he had an emergency meeting with a client. He wouldn't be home until late. I should eat without him. I ate alone at that beautifully set table, candles flickering, food growing cold. By 10 o'clock, the champagne had gone flat, and so had my hope. By 11, something in me snapped. I got in my car and drove to his office downtown, telling myself I would surprise him, that I would be the supportive wife bringing her hardworking husband coffee. The office was dark when I arrived. The entire floor was empty, except for the corner office at the end of the hall, Dorian's office, where a single lamp glowed through the glass walls, I walked toward it silently, some instinct telling me not to make a sound. And through those glass walls, I saw my husband. I saw him with his hands in the hair of a woman bent over his desk. A woman whose face I couldn't see, but whose body moved in rhythms I knew too well. The sounds of their pleasure reached me like knives, each moan cutting something vital out of my chest. I should have screamed. I should have burst through that door and confronted them, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there in the shadows, watching my marriage die in real time. Then the woman lifted her head, and the knife in my chest twisted all the way through. It was Celestine, my best friend, my maid of honor, the woman who had held my hand at my bachelorette party and cried tears of joy at my wedding, the woman who had dinner with us every Sunday and called me her sister. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember anything until I was standing in my bathroom, staring at my reflection, wondering who I was looking at. The woman in the mirror was a stranger, a fool, a puppet who had been dancing on strings she couldn't see. That night, something died in me, but something else was born. Something cold, something patient, something that would wait for the perfect moment to make him feel exactly what he had made me feel. I didn't confront Dorian. I didn't scream or cry or throw his clothes out the window. Instead, I smiled when he came home at 1 a.m, smelling like her perfume. I kissed his cheek and asked about his meeting. I played the role of the adoring wife so perfectly that he never suspected a thing, because I had decided something in those dark hours. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a dramatic confrontation. I wasn't going to let him paint me as the hysterical wife, the jealous woman, the villain of his story. No. I was going to hit him where it would hurt most. I was going to wound his pride in a way he would never recover from. I was going to sleep with his father. Now, I know what you're thinking. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I know. But you have to understand who Dorian's father was. You have to understand the dynamic in that family to comprehend why this was the only revenge that would truly destroy my husband. Ronan Ashford was a legend in Atlanta. At 62, he was still impossibly handsome, silver-haired and silver-tongued, with the kind of commanding presence that made everyone in a room stand a little straighter. He had built Ashford Holdings from a modest family business into an empire. He sat on the boards of hospitals and charities. He played golf with senators and dined with celebrities. But Ronan Ashford was also Dorian's deepest insecurity. From the day I met the Ashford family, I noticed the tension between father and son. Dorian craved his father's approval like a starving man craves bread. Every business decision, every achievement, every acquisition was done with one eye on Ronan, waiting for the nod of approval that never quite came. Ronan was proud of Dorian in his way, but he had a manner of undercutting his son, of reminding him that he was still the king and Dorian was merely the prince-in-waiting. If I slept with Ronan, it wouldn't just be infidelity. It would be the ultimate emasculation, the son cuckolded by the father, the prince humiliated by the king. Dorian's entire identity would crumble. It was cruel. It was calculated. And I spent weeks convincing myself that it was justified. The opportunity came at a family gathering at the Ashford estate, a weekend celebration of Ronan's 63rd birthday. Dorian was drinking heavily, performing his role as the devoted son while sneaking glances at his phone, probably texting Celestine. I watched him with dead eyes, feeling nothing but cold purpose. That night, While Dorian passed out drunk in our guest room, I found myself in the garden. And that's where Ronan found me. He was sober, contemplative, standing in the moonlight with a glass of bourbon in his hand. We talked, really talked. For the first time in the 2 years I'd known him, he wasn't performing the role of patriarch. He spoke about loneliness, about his wife, Miriam, who had stopped seeing him as a man decades ago, who slept in a separate wing of the house and spoke to him only about schedules and social obligations. He spoke about regret, and I listened. I leaned in. I touched his arm. I let him see me looking at him the way a woman looks at a man she desires. I told myself it was all part of the plan. I told myself I felt nothing. But something in his eyes, something vulnerable and hungry and desperately human, stirred something in me I hadn't expected. When he kissed me, I kissed him back. And when he led me to the pool house at the edge of the property, I followed. What happened next should have been empty. It should have been mechanical, a weapon wielded for war. But it wasn't. Ronan touched me like I was valuable. He looked at me like I was seen. For 1 hour in that pool house, I felt more cherished than I had felt in months with my own husband. And when it was over, when we lay there in the darkness, he said something that planted a seed I wouldn't understand for weeks. "You remind me of someone," he whispered. "Someone I lost a long time ago." I asked who. He shook his head, and the vulnerability in his eyes vanished, replaced by the mask of the patriarch. "No one you'd know," he said. "Just a ghost." We never spoke of that night again. I returned to my room, to my drunk husband, and I smiled in the darkness, because I had my weapon now. I had the secret that would destroy him when I was ready to use it. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I wanted to savor it. I wanted to wait for the perfect moment. 8 weeks passed. And then I woke up one morning sick to my stomach, my breasts tender, my period 3 weeks late. I bought 2 pregnancy tests, different brands. I needed to be sure. Both came back positive. I sat on the bathroom floor, staring at those 2 pink lines, trying to calculate, trying to remember. Dorian and I had been intimate once in the past 2 months, a perfunctory encounter that had felt more like obligation than passion. But the timing, the math, nothing lined up right. There was a very real chance that the baby I was carrying wasn't my husband's. There was a very real chance I was pregnant by my father-in-law. And that's when the true nightmare began. The days that followed were a blur of terror and denial. I went through the motions of my life like an actress hitting her marks, smiling when I was supposed to smile, speaking when I was supposed to speak, while inside I was drowning in a sea of my own making. Every morning I woke up and reached for my phone, desperate to see if the calendar had somehow changed, if time had rearranged itself to make the math work in my favor. But numbers don't lie. Calendars don't shift. And the truth sat in my stomach like a stone, growing heavier each day. I couldn't tell anyone. Who could I possibly tell? Certainly not Dorian, the cheating husband I had betrayed in return. Not my mother, the devout woman who had raised me to be better than this. Not my coworker friends who thought my marriage was perfect. I was utterly, completely alone with a secret that could destroy everything. I made an appointment with an obstetrician across town, far from anyone who might know me. Dr. Elaine Okonkwo was an older woman with kind eyes and steady hands who had no idea she was examining a woman who might be carrying the child of her husband's father. She confirmed what the tests had already told me. I was approximately 8 weeks pregnant. The embryo was healthy. She estimated my conception date. When she said the date out loud, my blood turned to ice. The window of conception included both possibilities, both men. There was no way to know without a paternity test, and there was no way to get a paternity test without revealing what I had done. I left that office and sat in my car in the parking garage for 2 hours, just staring at the steering wheel, trying to think my way out of a maze with no exit. What was I supposed to do? Tell Dorian I was pregnant and pray the baby looked like him? Pretend everything was fine while knowing that the child might be his half-sibling? The possibilities spiraled into darker and darker territory until I felt like I was going to be sick. That's when my phone rang. Ronan's name appeared on the screen. My heart stopped. We hadn't spoken since that night, not really. A few polite exchanges at family gatherings, nothing more. Why was he calling me now? I answered with a voice I didn't recognize, trying to sound normal, trying to sound like a woman who wasn't carrying a bomb in her belly. "Seraphina," he said, and the sound of my name in his voice made me shiver. "We need to talk. Can you meet me?" Every instinct told me to refuse. Nothing good could come from seeing him again, but I heard myself agreeing, heard myself writing down the address of a cafe on the outskirts of the city. An hour later, I was sitting across from my father-in-law in a quiet corner booth, watching him stir cream into his coffee with deliberate, measured movements. He looked older than I remembered, tired. The silver in his hair seemed more pronounced, the lines around his eyes deeper. He had the look of a man who hadn't been sleeping, and I recognized it because I saw the same look in my mirror every morning. "I know," he said finally. "I know you're pregnant." The world tilted. How could he possibly know? I hadn't told anyone. No one had seen me at the doctor's office. Unless someone was watching me. Unless I wasn't as invisible as I thought. "How?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "Miriam saw the pregnancy test box in your trash," he said. "She was visiting, using your guest bathroom. She told me, of course, because she tells me everything that might be useful later. That's the kind of marriage we have." His laugh was bitter. "Congratulations, by the way. Dorian must be thrilled." I stared at him, trying to read his face, trying to understand what he was really saying. Did he know? Or did he only suspect? Was he fishing? Testing? Trying to see if I would reveal the truth? "He doesn't know yet," I said carefully. "I haven't told him." Ronan nodded slowly. "I see. And when were you planning to share the good news with your loving husband?" There was an edge to his voice, something sharp and dangerous beneath the polite words. He knows, I thought. He has to know. He's doing the same math I did. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I need time to process it myself." "Time," Ronan repeated. "Yes. Time is a funny thing, isn't it? It can clarify. It can complicate. It can reveal truths we'd rather keep hidden." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made me want to look away. "Seraphina, I need you to be honest with me. Is there any chance at all, that this baby is not Dorian's?" And there it was. The question I had been dreading. The question I had no good answer for. I could have lied. I could have laughed and said, of course it was Dorian's. What a ridiculous question. But something in Ronan's eyes stopped me. something that looked almost like hope, and something that looked like fear. "I don't know," I said, and the truth felt like releasing a breath I'd been holding for weeks. "I don't know whose it is." Ronan closed his eyes. For a long moment, he was silent, and I watched the muscles in his jaw work, watched him fight some internal battle I couldn't understand. "There's something I need to tell you," he said finally. "Something I should have told you years ago, before you married my son. But I was a coward, and I convinced myself that it didn't matter, that the past was the past. I was wrong." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph, yellowed with age, creased from being handled many times. He slid it across the table to me. I looked down at the image, and the world stopped spinning. It was a photograph of a young woman, probably 19 or 20, with dark hair and large eyes, and a smile that seemed familiar in a way I couldn't explain. She was beautiful, hauntingly beautiful, and she was holding a baby in her arms. "Who is this?" I asked, though something in me already knew. Something in me had always known. "Her name was Evangeline Moreau," Ronan said. "And 30 years ago, I loved her more than I have ever loved anyone in my life. The name meant nothing to me. The face meant everything." "She looks like my mother," I whispered. "She looks exactly like my mother." Ronan's face crumpled, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw the patriarch of the Ashford Empire break. "Seraphina," he said, his voice cracking. "Evangeline was your mother's older sister. She was your aunt. And that baby in the photograph, the one she's holding, that baby is you. But she wasn't holding you because she was your aunt." I shook my head, refusing to understand, refusing to let the pieces fall into place. "No," I said. "My mother had a sister who died. She never talks about her. She died in a car accident when I was a baby." "She didn't die in a car accident," Ronan said. "She died in childbirth. She died giving birth to you. And I know that because I was there. I was there because Evangeline was not your aunt, Seraphina. She was your mother, your biological mother. And He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I felt the truth slam into me like a physical blow, knocking the breath from my lungs, making stars dance at the edges of my vision. "Let me ask you something right now, and I really want you to think about it. Have you ever discovered something about your family? Something that changed everything you thought you knew about yourself? Something that made you question who you really are? Drop that in the comments, because I need to know I'm not alone in this. And I need to know if you've ever felt the ground disappear beneath your feet the way I did in that moment." Ronan was not just my father-in-law. Ronan Ashford was my father. I had slept with my own father, the man I had used for revenge, the man whose child I might be carrying, shared my blood, shared my DNA, was the reason I existed at all. The bile rose in my throat so fast I barely made it to the bathroom before I was sick. I knelt on the floor of that cafe restroom, retching until there was nothing left, until my body was hollow and shaking. And then I sat there, with my back against the cold tile wall, trying to understand how my revenge had become something so much worse. When I finally emerged, Ronan was waiting. His face was gray, his hands trembling. "I know," he said before I could speak. "I know what we did. I suspected the moment I saw you at that gallery opening 3 years ago. You looked so much like her, like Evangeline. I tried to tell myself it was coincidence. I tried to stay away from you. But Dorian fell in love with you, and you became part of my life whether I wanted it or not." "Why didn't you say anything?" I demanded, my voice ragged. "Before I married him? Before any of this happened? Why didn't you stop it?" "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid of what it would do to Dorian. to my family, to my reputation. Your mother, the woman who raised you, she took you in when Evangeline died. She made me promise never to contact you, never to reveal the truth. She said it was better for everyone if you never knew. And I believed her because it was easier to believe her. I laughed, but there was no humor in it, only hysteria. You let me marry your son. You let me marry my own brother, and you didn't say anything because it was easier? The words hit Ronan like blows, and he flinched with each one. Dorian doesn't know, he said quickly. He has no idea. As far as he's concerned, he's my only child. Miriam never knew about Evangeline, about you. No one knows except your mother and me. And now you. And the baby, I said, my hand moving to my stomach. What about the baby I'm carrying? Your grandchild, your great-grandchild. What is this child going to be? Ronan had no answer. There was no answer. We need a paternity test, he said finally. We need to know if the baby is Dorian's or if it's... He couldn't say it. None of us could say it. We need to know before we can decide anything. He was right. I hated that he was right. But knowing wouldn't change what I had done. Knowing wouldn't erase the sin that was already committed. It would only determine how deep the wound went. There's a way to do it without anyone knowing, he said. A prenatal paternity test. It can be done as early as 8 weeks. We get the results, and then we figure out what to do next. I should have said no. I should have walked away, packed my bags, disappeared into some other life where none of this existed. But I needed to know. The uncertainty was worse than any truth could be. Fine, I said. Set it up. But I want to know something first. My mother, the woman who raised me. Does she know who you are? Does she know I married into your family? Ronan's face told me everything before he spoke. She knows, he said quietly. She's always known. She came to me when you first started dating Dorian. She begged me to stop the relationship somehow, to drive you apart before it went too far. I tried, Seraphina. I tried to make Dorian lose interest in you, but he wouldn't listen. And eventually, I convinced myself that it didn't matter. That you were so distant from me in terms of relationship that it was practically meaningless. That was wrong. I know that now. But by the time you were engaged, it was too late. The lie was too big to dismantle. My mother knew. My mother had known this entire time. She had walked me down the aisle, had smiled and cried and told me she was proud of me, knowing that I was marrying my half-brother, knowing that the father of the groom was also my father. The betrayals were stacking up so high I couldn't see over them anymore. I need to go, I said, standing on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. I need to think. Seraphina, wait, Ronan called after me, but I was already moving, already pushing through the cafe doors into the bright afternoon sun. I got in my car and I drove. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. I just needed to move, needed to put distance between myself and the wreckage of everything I thought I knew. Hours later, I found myself parked outside my mother's house in Savannah, the house where I grew up, the house where my mother had lied to me every single day of my life. I sat in that car until the sun went down, watching the lights come on inside, watching the silhouette of the woman who raised me move past the windows. The woman I called Mom. The woman who was really my aunt. The woman who had watched me walk into a nightmare and said nothing. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would confront her. Tomorrow I would demand the truth. But tonight, I just needed to sit with the ashes of who I used to be. The morning light was gray and heavy as I walked up the familiar porch steps of my childhood home. Every creak of the wooden boards sounded like an accusation. Every flower in the window boxes looked like a lie dressed in petals. I had rehearsed what I was going to say 100 times on the drive here, but now that I was standing at the door, all those carefully crafted words dissolved like sugar in rain. My mother answered on the second knock. She was in her nursing scrubs, getting ready for an early shift, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in the practical bun she'd worn my entire life. When she saw my face, her expression shifted from surprise to concern to something I had never seen before. Fear. "Seraphina," she said, and my name in her voice sounded different now. Loaded. Guilty. "I wasn't expecting you. Is everything all right?" I walked past her into the house without answering. The smell of coffee and toast hung in the air, the ordinary sense of an ordinary morning, but nothing was ordinary anymore. I turned to face her in the living room, surrounded by photographs of my childhood, of a life that had been constructed on foundations of sand. "Who is Evangeline Moreau?" I asked. The coffee cup in my mother's hand slipped, spilling hot liquid across the hardwood floor. She didn't move to clean it up. She just stood there, frozen, as the color drained from her face. "Where did you hear that name?" she whispered. "Does it matter?" I could hear the ice in my own voice. "Does it matter where I learned the truth you've been hiding from me for 29 years? My mother, this woman I had loved and trusted my entire life, closed her eyes. A single tear escaped and ran down her cheek. "I was trying to protect you," she said. "Everything I did was to protect you." "Protect me?" The laugh that escaped me was ugly, harsh. "You let me marry my own brother. You walked me down the aisle, knowing that Dorian and I share a father. How is that protecting me?" "I tried to stop it," she said desperately. "I went to Ronan. I begged him to interfere. But Dorian was in love with you, and nothing I said, nothing Ronan did could change that. By the time you were engaged, we thought, maybe it was different now. You'd been raised apart. You didn't know. What purpose would the truth serve except to destroy everything?" I stared at her, trying to reconcile the mother I knew with the woman standing before me. A woman who could rationalize such monstrous lies. "Tell me everything," I said. "From the beginning. I want to hear you say it." And so she did. Evangeline Moreau was her older sister by 3 years. Beautiful, wild, fearless. Everything my mother claimed she never was. When Evangeline was 19, she went to work as a secretary at Ashford Holdings, and that's where she met Ronan. He was 32, already married to Miriam, already father to a young Dorian. But Evangeline didn't care about any of that. She fell in love with him, and he with her, or at least he claimed to. Their affair lasted 2 years. 2 years of secret meetings and stolen moments, of promises that he would leave his wife, that they would build a life together. Evangeline believed every word. When she got pregnant, she was overjoyed. She thought this would be the catalyst that finally set Ronan free. But Ronan's reaction was not what she expected. He panicked. He told her he couldn't leave Miriam, couldn't abandon his son, couldn't destroy the empire his father had built. He offered to pay for an abortion. He offered to set her up somewhere far away where no one would know. Evangeline refused. She wanted the baby. She wanted me. The pregnancy was difficult from the start. Evangeline was young and healthy, but something wasn't right. She was tired all the time, and her blood pressure climbed dangerously high. The doctors warned her that carrying to term was a risk. She didn't care. She was determined to bring me into the world. to have something of Ronan that was entirely hers. When she went into labor, everything went wrong. The delivery was complicated, brutal. By the time I took my first breath, Evangeline was bleeding out on the operating table. She died 20 minutes after I was born, never having held me, never having spoken my name. My mother, her younger sister, was there. She had been Evangeline's only support through the entire pregnancy, the only family member who hadn't disowned her for the shame of being an unwed mother. When Evangeline died, my mother looked at me, this motherless infant with no claim to the Ashford name, and she made a decision. She would raise me as her own. Ronan agreed. Ronan was relieved. He gave my mother money, more than she had ever seen, and she took me back to Savannah and created a story. Evangeline had died in a car accident. I was my mother's biological daughter, conceived during a brief relationship with a man who had died before I was born. It was cleaner this way, simpler, safer. For 29 years, the lie held. Until I walked into that gallery opening and met a man named Dorian Ashford, never knowing he was my half-brother. Until I fell in love with him, married him, shared a bed with him for 2 years. Until I discovered his betrayal and sought revenge in the arms of a man I didn't know was my father. "You have to understand," my mother said, tears streaming down her face now. "I never thought you'd end up in Atlanta. I never imagined you'd cross paths with the Ashfords. It was such a big city, such a different world from ours. When you called to tell me you'd met someone, a man named Dorian, I didn't connect the name at first, and by the time I realized, you were already in love with him. What was I supposed to do? Tell you that your entire life was a lie? Tell you that the man you loved was your brother?" "The truth would have destroyed you." "And this doesn't?" I demanded. "Finding out now, after everything, this doesn't destroy me?" She had no answer. There was no answer. "There's more," I said, and I watched her face crumble further, watched the last of her hope die. "I'm pregnant, and I don't know if the father is Dorian or Ronan." The sound that escaped my mother was not quite human, a moan of pure anguish that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. She sank onto the couch, her body folding in on itself, becoming small and old and broken. "Oh, Seraphina," she whispered, "what have you done?" "What I've done?" The rage I had been holding back erupted now, hot and righteous and terrible. "What you've done! What Ronan has done! What all of you have done, building lies on top of lies until the whole structure became impossible. This is not my fault. This is the fault of everyone who chose silence over truth." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. I had made choices too. Terrible choices. I had slept with my father-in-law out of spite and revenge, not knowing he was my father, but knowing it was wrong. I had let my pain turn me into something I didn't recognize. I was not innocent in this disaster. My mother looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "There's a paternity test. Ronan is arranging it. Once we know whose baby this is, then... I don't know. I don't know anything anymore." "If it's Ronan's," my mother said slowly, each word seeming to cost her something. "If the baby is your father's, you can't... the genetic complications alone..." "I know," I cut her off. I couldn't hear her say it. "I know." I left her there, weeping on the couch in the house of lies she had built, and I drove back to Atlanta. The paternity test was scheduled for the following morning. Ronan had found a private lab, one that promised confidentiality, one that wouldn't ask questions about why a woman was comparing her DNA to her father-in-law's. The procedure was simple: a blood draw from me, a cheek swab from Ronan. The results would take 3 days. 3 days of hell. I went through those 72 hours like a ghost. I smiled at Dorian when he came home from his late nights. I cooked dinners I couldn't eat. I lay awake beside my husband, my brother, listening to him breathe and wondering how it was possible that I still didn't hate him the way I should. His betrayal seemed almost quaint now compared to the horrors that had been revealed. He had cheated on me with my best friend. But I had slept with his father. My father. Our father. On the 3rd day, Ronan called. "The results are in," he said. "We need to meet." I met him at a hotel room, far from anywhere we might be recognized. He was standing by the window when I arrived, an envelope in his hands, unopened. He held it out to me. "I can't," he said. "I can't open it. You have to do it." My hands were shaking as I took the envelope. It felt impossibly light for something that held such devastating weight. I slid my finger under the seal and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. The words blurred at first, my eyes refusing to focus. But slowly, painfully, they came clear. Probability of paternity, 0.0%. The father of my baby was not Ronan Ashford. Relief hit me like a wave, so powerful that my knees buckled. I grabbed the edge of a table to steady myself, gasping for air like I'd been underwater for years. "It's Dorian's," I breathed. "The baby is Dorian's." Ronan's face underwent a transformation. The fear that had been living there for days drained away, replaced by something else. Relief, yes, but also something that looked almost like disappointment. Like he had been hoping, in some twisted part of himself, for a different result. "Thank God," he said. "Thank God." But I wasn't thanking anyone, because the relief was already fading, replaced by the weight of everything else that still needed to be dealt with. The baby might be Dorian's, but that didn't change what I had done. It didn't change what Ronan had done. It didn't change the fact that I had been married to my half-brother for 2 years without knowing. And it didn't change the fact that Dorian was still going to find out. All of it. Everything. "What do we do now?" I asked. Ronan shook his head. "I don't know. I've spent 30 years running from this truth. I don't know how to stop running." "I can't go back," I said. "I can't go back to that house and pretend I don't know what I know. I can't look at Dorian and see my brother. I can't." "Then don't," Ronan said. "Leave. Take the baby and start over somewhere else. I'll give you money, enough to never need anything. You can disappear, build a new life, raise your child away from all of this poison." It was tempting. God, it was tempting. To just run, to escape, to pretend none of this had ever happened. But I couldn't, because somewhere in the wreckage of the past few weeks, I had found something I didn't expect. I had found a truth that needed to be spoken, no matter how much pain it caused. I was tired of lies. I was tired of secrets. I was tired of everyone deciding what I should and shouldn't know about my own life. "No," I said. "I'm not running. I'm going to tell Dorian everything. He deserves to know who he really is. who I really am, what his father did, all of it. Ronan's face went pale. You can't. It will destroy him. It will destroy the family. The family is already destroyed, I said. It's been destroyed for 30 years. We just didn't know it. But I'm done pretending. I'm done being the woman everyone lied to. And I'm done being the woman who lies in return. I walked out of that hotel room with the test results in my hand and a strange new feeling in my chest. It took me a moment to identify it. This unfamiliar sensation. It was power. For the first time in my life, I had the truth, and I was going to use it. I waited until evening to confront Dorian. I wanted him sober. I wanted his full attention, and I needed time to gather my courage, to build walls around my heart strong enough to withstand what was coming. He came home at 7, earlier than usual, looking tired but pleased with himself. Probably had a good day at the office. Probably closed some deal that would make the Ashford empire even richer. He kissed my cheek on his way past and headed for the liquor cabinet. Long day? I asked, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. Nothing I couldn't handle, he said, pouring himself a scotch. What's for dinner? I almost laughed. Here I was, about to detonate his entire existence, and he was asking about dinner. There's something I need to tell you, I said. Can you sit down? Something in my tone made him pause. He turned to look at me, really look at me, for the first time in what felt like months. His eyes narrowed slightly, sensing danger. What's wrong? He asked, but he didn't sit. I know about Celestine, I said. I know you've been sleeping with her. I saw you, 2 months ago, in your office. The color drained from Dorian's face. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stood there with his scotch in hand, frozen like a man who had walked into a trap and was only now seeing the jaws closing around him. Seraphina, he started, but I held up my hand. Don't insult me with denials or excuses. I'm not here to fight about your affair. That's the least of what we need to discuss. He looked genuinely confused now, which was almost funny. He thought his infidelity was the worst secret between us. He had no idea. What else is there? He asked warily. Sit down, Dorian, please. He sat, and I sat across from him, and I took a breath that felt like the last breath before drowning. I'm pregnant, I said. About 10 weeks now. A cascade of emotions crossed his face. Surprise, then something that might have been joy, then suspicion. The last one hurt, even though I understood it. Is it mine? He asked, and his voice was harder now. Yes, I had a paternity test done. The baby is yours. Why would you need a paternity test? His suspicion was growing, feeding on something dark inside him. Who else would the father be? And there it was, the door I needed to walk through, the confession I needed to make before I could reveal the larger truth. Because I slept with someone else, I said, 2 months ago. The night I caught you with Celestine, I was so broken, so destroyed, that I did something terrible. I slept with someone to hurt you the way you had hurt me. Dorian's face twisted with rage. Who? He demanded. Who did you sleep with? Your father. The scotch glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. He didn't seem to notice. He was staring at me like I had grown a second head, like I had spoken in a language he couldn't comprehend. That's not possible, he said. You're lying. My father would never. He did. We did. At his birthday party, in the pool house while you were passed out drunk upstairs. It happened, Dorian. I'm not lying. He was on his feet now, pacing, his hands in his hair, his breathing ragged. I could see the rage building in him, see him fighting to contain an explosion that wanted to tear through the room. "Why would you tell me this?" he demanded. "Why would you confess to something so sick, so twisted? You slept with my father? My father?" "Because there's more," I said, and the words felt like glass in my throat. "Because there's something else you need to know. Something about your family that everyone has been hiding from you your entire life." He stopped pacing, turning to face me with wild eyes. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out the photograph that Ronan had given me, the picture of Evangeline holding a baby, the picture of my biological mother holding me. "Do you know who this woman is?" I asked. Dorian looked at the photo, his brow furrowing. "No? Should I?" "Her name was Evangeline Moreau. 30 years ago, she had an affair with your father. She got pregnant. She died giving birth to the baby, and that baby was raised by her younger sister, who told everyone the child was her own." I watched his face as the pieces started coming together, watched the horror dawn in his eyes as he understood what I was telling him. "Seraphina," he said slowly, his voice barely audible. "Are you saying—" "I'm your sister, Dorian. Your half-sister. Your father is my father. We share the same blood, and no one told either of us until it was far too late." He stumbled backward, his hand reaching for the wall to steady himself. His face had gone gray, the rage replaced by something far worse. Revulsion, horror, betrayal. "No," he said. "No, that's impossible. My father wouldn't. He wouldn't let me marry my own sister. He wouldn't let us." "He did," I said, and there was no satisfaction in it, only sorrow. "He watched us marry, knowing what we were to each other. He said nothing because it was easier, because the truth was too complicated, because he was a coward." Dorian was shaking now, his whole body trembling like a leaf in a storm. "The baby," he said. "You said the baby is mine. But if you're my sister, then the baby is still genetically complicated," I finished for him. "But the paternity test confirms that you are the father, not Ronan. The baby is yours, Dorian. Our child is the product of a union that should never have happened. But it did. And now we have to decide what to do with that truth." He collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands, and for a long time he didn't speak. I watched him struggle, watched him fight to process something that was simply too big, too terrible to comprehend. When he finally looked up, there were tears on his face. Dorian Ashford, the golden boy who never showed weakness, was crying. "Did you know?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Before we got married, did you know who you were?" "No," I said firmly. "I had no idea. My mother, the woman who raised me, never told me about Evangeline. I only found out after I slept with Ronan. He told me then. He recognized me, Dorian. He knew who I was from the moment he saw me, and he still said nothing." Dorian's grief was transforming now, hardening into something colder. Rage, pure, focused rage. But not directed at me, directed at his father. "He knew," Dorian said, his voice low and dangerous. "He watched us fall in love, watched us get married, watched us build a life together, knowing the whole time that you were his daughter, that I was marrying my own sister." "Yes. And my mother? Does she know?" "Ronan says she never knew about Evangeline, but I'm not sure what to believe anymore." Dorian stood up slowly, his movements careful, controlled. The trembling had stopped. Something had settled over him, a cold calm that was almost more frightening than the rage. "I need to talk to him," he said. "I need to hear him explain this himself." "Dorian, wait," I said, standing to block his path. "What are you going to do?" He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I had never seen before. Not the charming golden boy, not the cheating husband, not even the broken man. Something older, something that had been forged in the fire of this impossible revelation. "I'm going to get the truth," he said. "All of it. And then I'm going to make sure my father pays for what he's done." He walked out, and I let him go. What happened next is something I had to piece together later, from fragments and confessions and police reports. But this is what I know. Dorian drove to the Ashford estate. It was nearly midnight when he arrived, but the lights in Ronan's study were still burning. Father and son faced each other across the mahogany desk where so many business deals had been made, so many fortunes built. Dorian didn't waste time on pleasantries. He demanded the truth, and Ronan, perhaps sensing that lies were no longer possible, gave it to him. He admitted everything. The affair with Evangeline, the pregnancy, her death, the decision to let my mother raise me, the moment he recognized me at the gallery, the years of watching his son build a life with his daughter, saying nothing, hoping that somehow it would all work out. Dorian listened in silence, and when Ronan was finished, when all the words were spoken and all the excuses made, Dorian did something no one expected. He reached into the drawer of his father's desk, the drawer where Ronan kept a handgun for protection, and he pulled the weapon out. Ronan didn't move. He sat there, looking at the barrel of his own gun in his son's hands, and he said, "I deserve this. If you pull that trigger, I won't blame you." For a long moment, Dorian stood there with the gun leveled at his father's chest. The weight of 30 years of lies hung in the air between them. Then Dorian lowered the gun. "No," he said. "That would be too easy. I want you to live with this, Father. I want you to live knowing that you destroyed your own family. I want you to watch while I take everything you built and burn it to the ground." He walked out, taking the gun with him. The next morning, Ronan Ashford was found dead in his study. But Dorian didn't kill him. What the police found was a single gunshot wound, self-inflicted. Beside him was a letter, 6 pages long, confessing to everything. The affair, the lies, the sin of letting his children marry without knowing who they were. The letter was addressed to me. The funeral was a spectacle. All of Atlanta society turned out to pay their respects to Ronan Ashford, the titan who had built so much, who had touched so many lives. They didn't know what he had done. They didn't know about the letter, which the police had sealed as part of the investigation. They saw only the grieving widow, the stoic son, the beautiful daughter-in-law with her hand on her belly. They didn't know that the daughter-in-law was also a daughter, that the stoic son was also a brother to his wife, that everything they thought they knew about the Ashford family was built on lies. In the weeks that followed, Dorian and I existed in a strange limbo. We were still legally married, still living in the same house, but we slept in separate bedrooms. We barely spoke. The weight of what we had learned hung between us like a wall, impossible to breach. My pregnancy progressed. Every doctor's appointment was a reminder of the impossible situation we were in. The baby was healthy, growing well, but every time I saw the ultrasound, I thought about genetics, about what complications might arise from parents who shared a father. The doctors didn't know, of course. We hadn't told anyone except my mother, who had come to Atlanta to help in the aftermath of Ronan's death. She moved through the house like a ghost, carrying her own burden of guilt, trying to make amends in ways that could never be enough. One evening, 3 weeks after the funeral, Dorian came to my door. He looked thinner, older, like the past month had aged him a decade. But there was something different in his eyes, something that looked almost like peace. "Can we talk?" he asked. I let him in, and we sat in the window seat, looking out at the garden where the spring flowers were beginning to bloom. New life emerging from dead earth. It seemed almost cruel. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about what we're going to do, about the baby, about us. And?" I spoke to a geneticist, someone discreet, recommended by a friend. I told him our situation, hypothetically, and asked about the risks. My heart clenched. This was the conversation I had been avoiding, the question I was too afraid to ask. He said that with half-siblings, the risk of genetic complications is elevated, but not as severe as it would be with full siblings or parent-child relationships. He said there's about a 25% chance of some recessive genetic issue expressing itself. That's significant, but it's not certain. The baby might be perfectly healthy. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. 25% was terrifying, but it was also 75% in our favor. The odds could have been so much worse. "What about us?" I asked. "What do we do now that we know the truth?" Dorian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something that sounded like acceptance. "I've been trying to figure out how I feel about you," he said. "I mean, really feel about you, underneath everything. And the truth is, I loved you before I knew any of this. I fell in love with a woman named Seraphina Cole, who was brilliant and kind, and made me want to be a better man. The fact that you share my father's blood doesn't change who you are. It doesn't change what I felt. But it changes everything else," I said. "We can't stay married, Dorian. Even if no one ever finds out, we would know. Every time we looked at each other, we would know." "I know," he said. "I'm not suggesting we continue as we were. But maybe we can find another way. Maybe we can be something else to each other. Family, in a different sense. Co-parents to a child who deserves better than the mess we've made of things." I looked at this man, this person I had married out of love and betrayed out of rage. This person who was my husband and my brother, the father of my child and the victim of the same lies that had entrapped me. "I need to tell you something," I said. "About Celestine. About why I did what I did." And I told him everything. About seeing them together. About the devastation I felt. About the cold, calculated decision to seduce his father as revenge. About how the revenge had turned to something else in that pool house. Something confusing and complicated that I still couldn't fully understand. He listened without interrupting. When I was finished, he nodded slowly. "I'm not going to pretend my affair doesn't matter," he said. "It does. I hurt you, and I'm sorry. I was arrogant and selfish, and I took you for granted. But you hurt me too, Seraphina. You slept with my father. My father. Before we knew the truth about who you were, that was still a betrayal I'm not sure I can ever fully forgive." "I know," I said. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking for understanding. Can you understand why I did it, even if you can't forgive it?" He thought about this for a long time. "Yes," he said finally. "I can understand. I pushed you to it with my own actions. We were both drowning, and we both grabbed at anything we could to stay afloat, even if it meant pulling each other under." A strange sense of peace settled over me. Not happiness, not joy, but something quieter: acceptance. We had done terrible things, been victims of terrible things, but somehow we were still here, still trying to find a way forward. "What happens now?" I asked. "We get divorced," he said simply. Quietly, without scandal. "I'll support you and the baby financially, and we'll share custody. We'll tell people we grew apart, that the strain of my father's death was too much. No one ever needs to know the real reason. And the truth about who I am, who we are to each other, stays buried. For the baby's sake, if nothing else. Our child doesn't need to grow up with that burden. They can know you as their mother and me as their father. They don't need to know they were also their parents' niece or nephew." It felt like another lie, another layer of deception piled on all the others. But he was right. Some truths are too heavy for anyone to carry. Some secrets exist to protect the innocent from the sins of the guilty. The divorce was finalized 2 months before my due date. It was quiet and civilized, exactly as Dorian had promised. I moved into a townhouse he bought for me across the city, close enough that he could visit, but far enough that we could have separate lives. And on a crisp October morning, I gave birth to a daughter. She was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, dark curls, and eyes that couldn't decide if they were brown or green. The doctors found no genetic abnormalities, no complications, no evidence of the complicated circumstances of her conception. She was just a baby, innocent and new, untouched by the sins of her parents and grandparents. I named her Evangeline, not after the woman who gave me life and died for the privilege, but as a promise to myself that I would do better, that I would be honest with my daughter in ways that no one had been honest with me, that when she was old enough, she would know her story, all of it, even the parts that hurt. Dorian was there for the birth, holding my hand through the contractions, crying when his daughter was placed in his arms for the first time. In that moment, we were not ex-spouses, not brother and sister, not 2 people bound by tragedy. We were just parents, overwhelmed by the miracle we had created. My mother stayed for the first month, helping with the baby, cooking meals, doing laundry. She never spoke about the past unless I brought it up, and I rarely did. Some wounds are better left to heal in silence. But one night, when Evangeline was 3 weeks old and finally sleeping through the night, I found my mother sitting in the nursery, watching my daughter breathe. "She looks like her," my mother said softly. "Like Evangeline. You're Evangeline." "I know," I said. "That's why I chose the name." My mother turned to look at me, and in her eyes I saw decades of guilt, of regret, of desperate love. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know I've said it before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry for all the lies, for all the secrets, for everything I thought I was protecting you from. I was wrong. I was so wrong." I sat down beside her and took her hand. "I know," I said, "and I don't know if I can fully forgive you yet, but I'm trying. For her sake, if nothing else. She deserves a grandmother who loves her, not one who carries so much guilt she can't function." My mother squeezed my hand, tears running down her face. "I will spend the rest of my life earning her trust and yours. I swear it." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. 5 years have passed since that night in the nursery. Evangeline is in kindergarten now, a bright and curious child who asks questions I'm not always ready to answer. She has Dorian's smile and my stubbornness, a combination that makes her both delightful and exhausting. She splits her time between my townhouse and Dorian's new apartment, comfortable in both homes, loved by both parents. Dorian and I have found our own kind of peace. We are not friends, exactly, but we are not enemies either. We are partners in the most important project of our lives, raising a child who deserves better than the circumstances of her creation. We sit together at her school plays, alternate holidays, present a united front at parent-teacher conferences. The lawyers would call it successful co-parenting. I call it survival. He never remarried. Neither did I. Some people are marked by their past in ways that make new beginnings impossible. We carry the weight of what we were to each other, what we did to each other, and it makes us cautious with our hearts. Perhaps that will change someday. Perhaps not. My mother passed away last year, peacefully in her sleep, after years of declining health. At her funeral, I spoke about the woman who raised me, who loved me, who made terrible decisions out of a desperate desire to protect me. I didn't speak about the lies. The dead deserve their secrets. When I went through her things, I found a box of letters. Letters from Evangeline, my biological mother, written during her pregnancy. Letters addressed to me, to the daughter she never got to hold. In them, she spoke of her hopes for my future, her regrets about my father, her absolute certainty that I would be born and that I would be loved. The last letter was written the night before she went into labor. "My darling daughter," she wrote, "I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. You are wanted. You are loved. No matter what happens, no matter who raises you or what they tell you about where you came from, remember that you were created by love. Imperfect love, complicated love, love that the world might not understand, but love nonetheless. Be brave, my little one. Be kind. And when you fall, as we all do, have the courage to get back up. Your mother, Evangeline." I read that letter to my daughter on her 5th birthday. She didn't understand all of it, not yet. But someday she will. Someday she'll read all the letters, learn all the truths, understand the full scope of the story she was born into. And when that day comes, I hope she'll understand why I made the choices I made. The good ones and the bad ones. The revenge I sought and the redemption I found. The lies I uncovered and the truths I finally learned to speak. Because here is what I know now, after everything. We are more than the circumstances of our birth. We are more than the sins of our fathers and mothers, more than the secrets that were kept from us, more than the mistakes we made when we were hurt and broken. We are the choices we make when the truth finally comes to light. We are the love we give to those who depend on us. We are the way we rise after we fall. I slept with my husband's father for revenge. 8 weeks later, I was staring at 2 positive pregnancy tests and an impossible secret. And from that nightmare, from that pit of lies and betrayal and genetic horror, I found my way to something that looks remarkably like peace. My daughter is playing in the garden as I write this. She's chasing butterflies, laughing at something only she can see. The sun is warm on her dark curls, and she looks so much like the photograph of Evangeline that sometimes it takes my breath away. She is the best thing that ever happened to me. She is the proof that even the darkest stories can have bright endings. She is my redemption. And when she's old enough, when she asks me to tell her the story of how she came to be, I will tell her the truth. All of it. The love and the betrayal. The revenge and the revelation. The father who was also an uncle. The mother who was also a sister. I will tell her that her story began in pain, but grew into something beautiful. That she was born from impossibility and became the most possible thing in my world. I will tell her that she is wanted. She is loved. And no matter what the future holds, she will always have a home. Because that is what I learned from the ruins of the Ashford Empire, from the ashes of my marriage, from the grave of my biological mother who died giving me life. The truth may set you free, but love is what gives you somewhere to go once you're free. And I am finally, after all these years, home. If you made it to the end of this story, I need you to do something for me. I need you to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because there are more stories like this one waiting to be told. Stories of secrets and survival, of revenge and redemption, of the impossible bonds that tie us to each other, even when we wish they wouldn't. And in the comments, tell me this. Do you think Seraphina made the right choice, keeping the truth from her daughter for now? Would you have done the same? Let me know, because I want to hear your voice in this conversation. Until next time,